Disclaimer: the following video can contain spoilers. After the death of her mother, Bee, Kaylee Fleming, returns to her childhood home where she would encounter ifs, imaginary friends, who were orphaned and now seek a new child to befriend. Its unsuccessfulness propels Bee to help these ifs retry befriending their old kid, now grown up. Where do we begin? I'm on the fence about this movie. I can see its value and where this movie was going, but sadly, I think ultimately its direction wasn't very good. As sad as it is to say, it fails at three big things, which ultimately makes the movie suffer on becoming as compelling as what it sought out to do, because 1, the movie's direction, 2, Bea and her character, and 3, the story itself. Let's begin. The movie opens up with a series of recordings of the past. With Bea narrating to us about her mother's teachings on stories, we slowly see Bea's world changing within these recordings. Her mother's health worsens, and the opening ends with young Bea, Audrey Hoffman, and her father, John Krasinski, waving goodbye as they leave. Bea's world is shattered after the events that happen off screen. She's not the same kid we saw from the opening. We're shown and told that she doesn't seem to care about fun or joy as much as she once did. However, her demeanor constantly shifts between two halves. This only confused me because I couldn't pinpoint her character, nor if she had some sort of character arc at the end. Let me break it up for you. Because of the tragedy of her mother, and now the potential threat of also losing her father, she's battling life in the form of not finding enjoyment in things that she once did. She sees life for what it truly is: sadness. In a way, these events make her feel some level of maturity, claiming she isn't a kid anymore and that fun and silliness is just too immature and only acceptable for the youth and kids. So, then why does she constantly smile, laugh, and grins wherever she goes?
Oh, Grandma? I'm 12. I don't really do that anymore.
Apart from being compelled to help ifs almost immediately after finding out of their existence. And before I get ahead of myself, yes, I will definitely talk about this later. She tells her father to grow up and stop being so foolish, yet smiles every time he does anything.
Dad? You really don't have to do this.
Do what?
Treat me like a kid.
Ah.
Sometimes life doesn't always have to be fun. You know?
Shouldn't she be worried about her father's future surgery? Shouldn't she be afraid that life will continue to disappoint, leaving her without parents and to be full of pain and torment? We never really go down that route. We never see her have this sort of sentiment and mindset whenever she visits her father.
Oh, well.
You have to stop.
Never.
I also have to ask, and I know this is probably me nitpicking, and do correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments below, but shouldn't the father be in a hospital gown and not fully clothed? I'd argue the scene would demonstrate the message of the movie better if he was in hospital attire instead of his regular clothing, where him smiling and being content would provide more of a contrast because he's in a hospital gown. But again, a minor detail, I suppose. As Bea visits her father, she ends up talking to some random kid. And even then, after her conflicts with life, she continues smiling, laughing, and talking to him like she likes life. Not to mention, she continues to visit him after her first conversation, helping him and the ifs, not allowing me to understand her stance in the world. Personally, I feel that this scene would be better if instead of a kid randomly talking to her as she passes by his room, if the scene would play like this. Because her father was moved to a different room, say to one closer to the surgery room as he's being prepped for it, she walks into the room thinking her father would be there, but instead it's Benjamin, Alan S. Kim, thinking she is there for him, sparking this conversation. And not wanting to talk a lot, she brushes his conversation, giving him single-worded answers or open-ended responses, essentially not understanding how he too can be content given his state. Life's unfair anyways. She goes about her business, but something he said stays lodged inside her mind. She cannot get it out, prompting her return to him in scenes yet to come. How better would this be instead of what we got? Not only would we stay true to B's current state of character, but the events seem to be realistic and not feel so forced. It would also propel B to return to the kid, and eventually change her demeanor, as he is one of the reasons B would change her perspective in life. To further my point, let's continue on with the movie. B comes across Blossom, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, thinking she's a child. She goes to greet her, but is confused when she runs away. Overhearing her and the man upstairs, Ryan Reynolds, she follows them and finds out the existence of ifs. Asking a lot of questions, B finds out about these ifs and their plea for help on finding a new potential kid. Not wanting any part of it, she claims seeing these ifs is a curse, and wishes her nightmare to stop. However, upon further questions, she feels remorse for them, wanting to help them now. Not only do her constant shifts between not caring to caring feels jarring, but it also doesn't feel warranted or real. It feels more forced, where this needs to happen in order for the movie to continue without any real merit to these actions or feelings. In short, I would argue that these shifts don't help B's character arc, because these shifts happen early in the movie as opposed to her realizing her mistake, propelling her to overcome these hurdles for Act 3 with a different mentality. Just look at this example. In the beginning, B tells her father that she's not a kid. She continues on with this belief when meeting the ifs for the first time. So then why would she happily say she can help the ifs because she's a kid? This counters what she said before, destroying any character arcs that were set in motion because she already accepted her role. And we haven't begun Act 2.
So I help you place him with new kids. And that's it? Everything goes back to normal?
Careful what you wish for.
To sum up what I said, the direction of which this movie was taken was so confusing that I wasn't sure I understood B's stance in anything. Her constant shift between I'm not a kid to accepting she's a kid early in the movie didn't allow me to fully follow along our protagonist through this journey at all. Now, in terms of story, I also had so many questions at the end. Sure, some stemmed more of my curiosity of the world itself, like, how exactly do the rules in this world work?
He doesn't need me anymore.
He doesn't? That's so sad.
More like terrifying. Ooh, because if he doesn't need me,
Blue?
he can't see me.
Blue, over here.
And if he can't see me,
Look at me.
then all that's left is to disappear.
Blue.
But many questions were about the story. From the many flaws within this movie that either contradicts itself in future scenes, things that weren't explained right or never explored at all, to questions related to B's character. The story in its simplest form is B helps ifs reconnect with their kids now grown up. Adding a bit of substance to the story, we add B's conflict with life, ifs conflicts with being abandoned and having to find solace in that, much like B needing to find solace in life, perhaps? However, it is with how the movie was executed with this substance that I began to have a lot of questions, mainly because of how the story was delivered. When B learns the existence of these ifs, she asks multiple questions about them. Here, Blue says, because if he doesn't need me, he can't see me. And if he can't see me, then all that's left is to disappear. Cool. Now there are stakes involved with these characters. Perhaps even the death of these imaginary friends, something B would feel empathy for because she understands the feeling. However, because we never saw an instance of these ifs actually disappearing, not only was I disappointed, but I was confused why this was even said in the first place. If the movie wasn't going to show it, why say it? Especially given that Louis Gossett Jr., will later on say, nothing you love can ever be forgotten. You can always come back. Memories, they live forever. Right there in your heart. So would this mean that because memories can never truly be forgotten, these ifs cannot be forgotten and therefore have no risks of disappearing? Perhaps I'm not understanding it, but doesn't what Lewis say contradict what Blue says? Steve Carell. If an if doesn't truly ever die, where's the stakes? If the story contradicts itself or doesn't explore certain things in a much deeper level, then the audience won't be able to follow the story. So what happens to an if a kid sadly passes away? Or an adult for that matter? There should be a lot more ifs, right? Given the population of the world. Are some of these ifs ancient that they never got back with their kid? Or are all these ifs more recent? Unfortunately, I'm still asking myself these questions because the story never answered any of those. Sadly, the movie is ridiculed with instances like these. B asks if she helps ifs get new kids. Everything goes back to normal. However, we didn't really see what her normal looks like, why she doesn't want to see ifs, why she wants to return to normal. So this part to me doesn't really mean anything. This doesn't motivate B in any meaningful way. It doesn't demonstrate B's character, nor does it really help the story at all. When B goes to Memory Lane retirement home, she meets Lewis, who tells her that the place can be anything she wants it to be. All she needs is a little imagination. Calvin then proceeds saying, no, 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 while B starts changing up the place in this montage. We get more scenes like this, and I kept asking, what is going on right now? What is this supposed to do in the story? Does it mean that B is regaining her imagination, her creativity, her fun? If so, then why is Calvin complaining, arguing, or just saying no, 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 not liking it? But because we never really delved with B's character in the beginning as someone who stopped caring and therefore loses part of her imagination, this part doesn't seem like character development or progression within the story that moves it forward. Instead, this scene feels out of place, not needed. Why was it necessary for B to make a book of ifs and their information if we saw one already on Calvin's desk earlier? Okay, I guess she added new information. However, it really isn't necessary information at all. Yes, even if B writes purpose protection, because the movie never explored that. She also only tried matchmaking with one kid. One. Before the movie pivots and they try returning to their own kid because of something Lewis says. It would have been better if we get the if's purpose and why they were made, asked a bunch of kids who need that purpose to be fulfilled, and have it where still they cannot see these ifs, making B pivot and look for a better solution because she sees what she was doing isn't cutting out. If smells or tastes help these kids recollect their childhood memories, and therefore remembering these ifs, because they're stored in the back of their mind, how is it that all it took for Jeremy to remember Blue was smelling croissants? Okay, sure, perhaps they were his parents' croissants. But you mean to tell me he went throughout his lifetime not smelling these croissants? I mean, his parents did own a bakery. Okay, maybe he relocated and therefore lost that distinct smell. But, and I guess you know where I'm going with this, because the movie never explored it, I would never know. Also, it seems he has a job. And although this is a small detail, I'd assume this means his parents are still alive. Did his bakery go down under? Were the croissants that B was eating actually from that bakery, or were they just regular croissants? Because if they were regular croissants, I highly doubt Jeremy went all his life not smelling a single croissant, given that we have seen him get a cup of coffee. And there was bread in the counter. How was it possible to photograph an if? Would it mean that they could be seen in CCTV recordings? If so, then why is it that people cannot see ifs? They can't see ifs, but they can see them in pictures? Or can they only see them in pictures if they believe? If they can see them in real life, like B. For example, in this photograph that the grandmother shows B, we see Blossom. Does that mean that the grandmother cannot see Blossom? But B can because she can see Blossom? I don't know. Did Jeremy hear him or not in this scene? Did he see him? I doubt it. But how could he hear him and not see him? Can you hear but not see ifs? If you can hear them but not see them, can't these ifs go to their kids, now adults, whisper to them and help them remember? I don't know. As an added bonus, I'll include my world building and world rules questions as well. Can ifs interact with the physical world or not? Can people go through these ifs if they can't see them, like in this scene? What are the limitations that ifs can do? Do they have to walk places or can they teleport? Do they follow the laws of physics? I don't think so, because this if can fly. If we've established that we need sensory stimulation for these adults to remember their ifs, why then in this montage do they see the ifs and it just works? I know, it's a lot. My point is that I had these questions because the story wasn't good at explaining things well. And unfortunately, it isn't just explaining things that the story didn't do too well on. It was in structure as well. Because this video is already long, I'll just say this. Typically in a script, what propels the protagonist forward for Act 3 is the epiphany moment. It's the moment after the protagonist hits rock bottom and realizes they've done everything wrong. It's when they realize the message of the movie, change up their ways, and end up victorious. But for this movie, it doesn't work well because B was fully on board before Act 2. When she tells the story to her father, it doesn't hit very hard. The story she tells her father is her story. She says she is so sad and so scared that she blocked out the world in order to not feel again. But she couldn't because of her father. But like I said earlier in my review, we didn't see that. She does tell her father to stop, but her actions and facial reactions say otherwise. She also says, "I'm just a kid." But again, this doesn't hit hard because she already agreed that she's a kid earlier in the movie. So her saying it here isn't impactful because we already saw that she agreed to it. So she didn't change. It isn't her realizing she was wrong and had a change of heart. It's just her saying it again after telling us before Act 2. I think the biggest question I had in this movie was how B can see these ifs if it was established that if the kids forget, they can't see them. But, and major spoilers here, if B forgot that Calvin was her if, how then can she see him? Sure, it also says that if the kid doesn't need them. So does that mean B still needs them? Would it mean that she could only see Calvin? How can she see the rest of the imaginary friends? Would this mean every kid can see every if? What are the rules? What are the world building rules that say this kid still needs their if? This kid still needs to learn a lesson or something. How does it work? And that's the biggest question I had with the movie that I still do not know after watching the movie like 3 times. Lastly, how better would it have been if instead of accidentally dropping the box because she was putting it back in the trunk of a car, if she decides to take the box with her? Because in the beginning, she didn't want the box. At the end, she likes it. She continues with her creativity, her imagination, her fascination with the world, for example, and wants the box back. Countering, in a good way now, the beginning. So rushing back home, she accidentally drops it. It results in the same way, but this way, it's connected to B's character. Unfortunately, I believe this movie did not do a good job with its message because of both the story and what was shown, and because of its direction. As painful as it sounds, the structure of the movie failed because of the protagonist's motivations, actions, character, and her development as the story progresses, and the story itself. Overall, it had good potential, but ended up focusing on things that were probably not needed to tell a compelling and emotional story. Because it neglected to inform us of the world or delved deeper into knowing who our protagonist really is, the movie failed in what it was trying to achieve. I couldn't pinpoint the protagonist's stance in the world, so I couldn't truly follow along through this journey and story that contradicts itself. I could see where the movie was going, but sadly, because its delivery and execution wasn't very good, I'd say the movie wasn't very good. And although I did like the ending, I felt it wasn't impactful or worth it. But anyways, those are just my thoughts. Did you enjoy the movie? Let me know what you thought about it down below, and I'll see you in the next review. Until then, God bless.